think you're still good. It's pretty wide angle.
Yeah, it's the whole classroom. All the videos are posted.
Oh, good.
So.
Same spot?
Yes. I created a second folder that's 411 speeches.
Okay.
I think I actually created 2 folders, but they're all in either folder.
Copy that. All right, well, fine. You ready?
Yes, sir.
All
Hey everyone, I'm Luke Stensberg, the one that Colonel Buchanan calls Kyle quite often. I'm going to be talking about Dead Man's Dump by Isaac Rosenberg. So, here's the poem. I'm not going to read it all. I've highlighted some lines that I think have some significant impact on the reader. And overall, this is an accurate commentary on World War I. The author, Isaac Rosenberg, was in fact in the war, and he was a casualty of the war. I would say that he really just tries to describe what he saw from someone who was there. He isn't explicitly trying to be persuasive to convince you of one thing, but in the end, when you read how the war was, it is convincing enough. And as you can see from the date, it occurred in 1917. First, I'm going to talk about the author himself. So he's known as an English poet, Jewish poet, war poet, and painter poet. The 2 paintings on the top are ones that he did himself. And he was born in 1890 in Bristol to 2 Jewish immigrants from what was then Russia. And he grew up in poverty and couldn't afford any education. He worked as an engraver's apprentice to start out, and eventually would just kind of do art and poetry on the side. He got noticed, and somebody actually funded him to go to an art school. And his poetry style, I read that it's a mix of Keats and Shelley. I'm not an English major, so I'm not sure what that kind of style is, but I thought it'd be worth mentioning for those of you who are scholars. The way I take his poetry is, I looked at a couple other poems. They're all just pretty deep and serious, and the ones that kind of stood the test of time are his war poetry from World War I. And then he died at age 28, so England kind of missed out on an up-and-comer poet. So World War I started with a lot of nationalism. It was a huge factor going into the war. Everyone thought that their own country was the best, and they were really happy to go out and fight for their country, and underestimated what war would really be like when you have millions of people on a continent just fighting each other in entrenched warfare and hardly gaining any ground, because basically you would have millions of people just in a stalemate with one side in one trench, one side in another, and they try to make runs to the other, but they're so heavily fortified that they would get mowed down by gunfire and barbed wire fencing and other defensive mechanisms that each force had. And then there's this thing called going over the top. That was kind of the term for when you'd hear the whistles and they have to run up and charge, just knowing that they're about to face bullets and artillery and barbed wire and craters. And I actually have a quote from somebody who was in the war and described it. He said, "As soon as you go over the top, fears left you and it is terror. You don't look, you see. You don't hear, you listen. Your nose fills with fumes and death. You taste the top of your mouth. You're hunted back to the jungle. The veneer of civilization has dropped away." So this really humbles man down to a basic just animal, as animal instincts really come up and the adrenaline is going through everyone's veins. It's pretty powerful. And to show how powerful it is, I'm going to show a clip from Legends of the Fall. Well, nice. Maybe I won't be able to. Try that thing again.
Come on, Andy, come on. Thanks.
Tristan and Alex are watching over me so carefully that I may never get the opportunity.
So that's pretty much Dead Man's Dump, the title of the poem. So we have a few images here that kind of describe the scenes. The one in the bottom left is actually how the poem starts out, talking about those cars that just ran the barbed wire fencing all along. And as I mentioned before, the poem really is just explaining what it's like to be one of these soldiers that just have to get up and charge at an enemy. And you can even hear in this video, the guy's like, is it wrong to want glory, seek nationalism? So there's just this odd conflict in the whole nature of World War I warfare. And the title is a pretty cynical way to kind of describe what was going on, just calling this battlefield Dead Man's Dump. It's almost just like a garbage pit of essentially men. Looking at some of those lines I highlighted before, we have a flood of brutish men to just describe the sheer mass of the war. The crown of thorns, going back to nationalism, it's kind of it's a comparison to Jesus wore the crown of thorns. And I think what Rosenberg was trying to symbolize is that they were fighting for a greater good, and it was a sacrifice. Their shut mouths made no moans. So I did body bags for my recitation, and that was about dead bodies coming alive and speaking to the person who would kill them. But this is a complete contrast to that. It's just saying these dead bodies just laid there and they rotted. And that's what would happen, that a lot of people didn't get buried, they just had to sit on the fields. And then at the end, he starts to kind of blame the earth for what's going on. He's not upset at the enemy that's shooting at him. He says the people have blind fingers. I took that to mean maybe they didn't really know what they're shooting at or what they were doing, but in a sort of paganist, pantheist manner, he shifts the blame to the actual battlefield itself by personifying it in that last paragraph there. So, it's a good poem. It's all on the poetry thing, the handout. It's the first one, so you guys should give it a read, and pending any questions, that's all I got.
Yeah, you should give it a read, because you were already assigned to be reading it. An additional read. All right, thanks, Luke. What do you guys got for his, let's talk about comm skills. I like the clip. Jim Harrison is the author of that short story that was turned into that movie. One of my favorite writers. What do you got for his comm skills, his presentation?
He seemed pretty,
Stuff, like he did like bullets, and like he knew what he's talking about. It wasn't like long bullets, it was just short and plain, he would expand about it.
Yeah, I'd say that's good feedback. He was rehearsed. Didn't read bullets because he just had one word reminders for himself to stick with. Yeah.
pretty confident up there.
Confident, yeah, you guys are all pretty good, confident in your presentation. Yeah, pretty calm, comfortable, kind of frozen in one spot, as most of you are. I gave all this feedback to the second period class, and Joey Speedshot went last, and so when he did it, he walked all over it. And it actually worked. He was trying to be kind of funny about it, but it worked really good. He ended up standing right here, looking at his slide. I mean, it's nice, right? Because even Luke had to like look over his shoulder and gesture back to a slide.